What's going on, guys? Welcome into the Fantasy Slant, which is powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. I am your host, Mike Tagliere, and I have alongside me our co-host, Kevin Cole. Kevin, you want to say hello?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Hey, guys, we are going to be doing something a little bit different today. We're going to be talking about some buy, sell, and holds. Kevin, it was an interesting week one. I'm excited to talk about some real football. What did you do for week one? Did you do anything fun with the family? What did you do for week one?
I was actually out of town week one, and I was stuck in a house of non-football watchers, believe it or not, in-laws. So I had to try to sneak in what I could. Luckily, I have this DirecTV thing through my mobile devices. It was like that commercial where the guy's kind of checking his phone and then the girlfriend's trying to catch him the entire time. So that was basically me the entire weekend, making little noises and then every now and again trying to explain it and then realizing that was just a fruitless exercise and I should just be quiet.
That sounds like a blast. I had a wedding. My brother-in-law decided to get married the Saturday night before, obviously, the NFL season. And then I went to the Bears-Packers game, rushed home so I could watch the other games, tried to catch up on my DVR. It was a hectic week one, to say the least. But it was nice to actually watch some real football, to digest it and kind of look at the numbers, break down some things that we thought may have, worked out like we said they would, some things that were total opposite. So we're going to talk about some of those players, the highs and lows. What I want to start on today is talking about Peyton Manning. Obviously, he finished week one as the number 32 fantasy quarterback. Now, and I believe that was in 6-point passing touchdown leagues. He's basically the worst, and that's never a good sign from Peyton Manning. It's weird to see that out of him. I didn't really ever think that he'd ever do that before he retired. Come to that. Now, I'm not sure where you stand on this, Kevin. We haven't really talked about it. We wanted to make sure we captured everything here. Peyton Manning's going to be playing tonight against the Kansas City Chiefs. We know the Chiefs are going to be missing a few cogs in the machine. Donte Poe is out, which is a huge, huge thing for their pass rush. Are you we're going to be talking about the buy, sell, and hold. Are you buying Peyton Manning? Are you holding him? Or are you trying to sell him while people still think maybe he just had one bad game?
I hadn't drafted Peyton Manning at all this year. And I'm kind of more of a late round sort of guy at quarterback. So I don't know if I would necessarily rush out to buy him, but if I drafted him, I'd hold him. I don't think it was that bad of a performance when you look at it in the context of the fact that they just weren't able to get anything going offensively. He missed Emmanuel Sanders on what could have been a couple of different touchdowns. I think it was actually 3 different times he missed them. So he was still trying to stretch the field a bit. He actually overthrew him. So, and he's had this wobbly pass thing going on for at least the last couple of years. So I don't think he's someone you should sell or trade away for nothing or drop or whatever people may be thinking about. I think he could come back with a pretty strong performance, and he threw the ball 40 times. So it's not as if they just totally took the air out of the ball or some situation like that. So he gives you potential to score. I just think it was a really overall just a poor game, and hopefully he'll be able to turn things around because he still has the weapons out there. Emmanuel Sanders looked great. Demaryius Thomas wasn't targeted enough probably, but he's out there. So I think he's a hold if you have him, but I wouldn't necessarily look to buy him unless you're just getting him for very cheap.
I'm with you on that one because if you look at it now, I was never one to talk about Peyton Manning's arm strength and to say, he's losing arm strength. The guy never really had it. He played smart up top. Now, to be fair, though, some of the passes that he threw last weekend, man, they were brutal. It looked like a high schooler playing against an NFL team. But not to say it could have been the week one jitters. I don't know. But here's another thing to look at. A lot of people are underestimating the fact that he was playing in the first game of Gary Kubiak's new offense. He was also playing against Gary Kubiak's team that he just literally coached last year. So this team knows Kubiak's offense. There's some adjustments that need to be made. I also think as the year goes on, maybe John Elway comes down and says, you know what, Gary, we need to start going back to where we know Peyton's strengths are, maybe not running so much 2 tight end sets. I just feel like there was so many things that were going against Peyton in this game, on top of the fact that the run game didn't get going at all. Now, that's another issue is that CJ Anderson, a lot of people are panicking, asking me to sell him. Should they sit him this week? And I'm not saying that CJ Anderson, I still view him as a low-end RB1, high-end 2 this week. He's inside my top 15. I hope it's not turf toe. They say it's not. He practiced a little bit leading up to the game. Are you worried about CJ Anderson at all?
I'm slightly worried. I mean, I think it's more of a worry for this week than it is overall. I think he'll still be productive. He was productive at the end of last season, even when Peyton Manning wasn't playing well. So I think like we don't know a lot coming into week one. We know a lot less than we think. And we especially don't know a lot about defenses. And it could just be the case that this Ravens defense is really good. Especially we're talking about in the secondary with Jimmy Smith back, who they were missing for a lot of time last year. I mean, he's a difference maker. He had that pick six. So I think maybe it was just a really strong performance by the Baltimore Ravens. And the Kansas City Chiefs, they looked okay against the Houston Texans, but Houston was rotating Blue and Grimes and Polk, and they were doing okay. They were chewing up some yards on the ground. They were able to score some touchdowns. So I think this is really going to be the panic moment for someone like C.J. Anderson, is if he plays – he gets reps and he still isn't able to be effective, but I don't see that happening. So I would go ahead and start him unless you really have a great option.
Right. I agree. And we'll see where, his trade value sits after this week. If it's me, I'm reaching out to the CJ Anderson owner and just seeing what he's looking for at this point. But look for those two to hopefully bounce back tonight. We definitely like to have Peyton Manning atop our fantasy rankings. We don't want to drop him down. I think I have him as my number 15 quarterback this week. I'm not totally off board with Manning, but I am not the best thing. He's on the road in KC, and that's a tough place to play. But going the opposite end of the spectrum, we had Peyton Manning, not do so hot. On the other end, we have Marcus Mariota going off, throwing 5 touchdowns in the first half. This stuff doesn't happen with rookies in their first NFL start, but it did. He played a bad defense. I talked to a few people, and they were like, well, he did play the Bucs, but it doesn't matter to me. He played an NFL team in his first career start, and he kind of picked up where he left off in the preseason for me. I know you and I had touched on Mariota last week, and you asked if I'd feel comfortable playing him. I said not over the top 12, 14 options, but I wouldn't feel bad playing him if I was streaming a quarterback. And it turns out I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that at all. But are we over the top on Mariota? Do we think that he's going to come back down to reality this week? I'd like to know where you kind of sit on it. What's your take on Mariota?
I liked him a lot coming into this year as a guy that you should roster as your second quarterback, just because he had a good draft pedigree. He looked good during the preseason. He obviously was a great prospect, and he gave you some rushing production, although he didn't really run the ball much at all. So I think in some ways that's discouraging because that could give you a floor going forward, but they were up by so much that a lot of the rushing production you're going to end up getting from a quarterback is actually when they're playing from behind and they're dropping back a lot, and then they're going to scramble and get yards like you see from Russell Wilson or someone like that. It doesn't have to be on a designed run. So I thought he looked really great. Expecting another performance like that is too much. But if you can roster him as your second quarterback, or if you want to look to pick him up for a streaming option, I think he'll be an excellent streaming option the rest of the season. I wouldn't go overboard though on this one game. Although the matchup against Cleveland, I don't think is that poor either, because Cleveland obviously has some offensive struggles. So this is another game where they could keep the game close, and I think he'll play well when they're close. The question is what happens if they get down big, and do the wheels fall off at that point? So that's yet to be seen.
Right. I'm not going to sit here and think that the Titans offense all of a sudden became top 5 overnight. I don't think that that's the case at all. If you have someone in your league that, is looking for that next Cam Newton, when you remember Newton came into the league and people started buying him after the first couple of weeks, sell Mariota. I'm selling him if you're able to get top dollar value. Now, if people are not willing to give you anything for him, obviously it's a hold. It's a hold, because if you're just going to play him platooning with another quarterback, that's fine. But if you're able to say, if you find someone in your league that's willing to give you, a solid wide receiver 3 for him, I'm doing it all day. If you're able to find someone that says, I'm giving up on Vincent Jackson or something like that, obviously you're going to say, yeah, I'll give you Mariota. But I'm kind of selling if you're able to get top dollar for him. I don't anticipate anybody in any of my leagues doing that, but I know there's a lot of leagues out there where people will overreact to week 1 and they will literally sell the farm to get a guy that threw 5 touchdowns in the first half. Another guy, I
think the Cam Newton comp is actually pretty interesting because, like I mentioned with the rushing production, you shouldn't forget that Cam Newton as a rookie, he had over 700 yards rushing and 14 rushing touchdowns. So, that's the huge boost to production, and we didn't see any evidence of that from Mariota in the first game.
No, it's true. And they did run some option stuff with Bishop Sankey, which, by the way, I'm going to touch on this real quick, Kevin, because I know we're actually going to running backs now. We touched on a few quarterbacks. What we're going to do is touch on a few players that performed really well and some that didn't. Bishop Sankey obviously performed very well. I had talked about starting him. I've been all over him this offseason, but I'm almost to the point where I'm saying sell. I'll tell you why. In a game where they were up so much, it was Wisenhunt's opportunity to say, you know what, Sankey, we're going to see what you can do with this offensive line, work together. He got 14 touches inside of a game where they were demolishing the Bucs. Now, some people might say, well, why would you keep your starter in there when you have that much of a lead? But they never really announced Sankey as like the starter. Like, he's not the workhorse that we all wanted him to be going into the season. We were concerned about it. Terrence West actually got more carries than him in week 1. Bishop Sankey, I'm at the point where it's like, he's got another great matchup this week. So you could ride it out and say, you know what, I'm going to take one more week out of him and then I'm going to sell. I'm actually on the sell Sankey trade just because I don't trust Ken Wisenhunt. Are you buying, selling, or holding Bishop Sankey?
Yeah, I would definitely field some offers if I had him right now, and I wouldn't be buying. Like you mentioned, it was pretty much a ideal game from a game script scenario. They got a big, they should have been running the ball a lot. They did run the ball a lot, but like you mentioned, Terrence West was very heavily involved. Now, Sankey did have a goal line carry for a touchdown that he converted, but West got a ton of carries right near the goal line that he just wasn't able to convert any of them. And McCluster was pretty much marginalized because of the game script. He was in there a bit on some third downs. I think he was in there on that touchdown to Kendall Wright early in the game, but he didn't play a whole lot. So things could flip around in a different scenario. I mean, I probably hold him because I don't know if people are really buying him, quite honestly. There's just it's kind of a negative sentiment swirling around Bishop Sankey. So I don't know how much you're going to get for him. If you can get something good or you can package him for something good, I would look to sell him. Otherwise, I would hold him. And you never know. I mean, he was effective, and Mariota could be someone who makes the running back on that team finally effective. So maybe coaches will start to buy in and give him a little bit of a heavier workload. It's possible.
I've heard of some people packaging Bishop Sankey with someone like a Charles Johnson or an Anquan Bolden for Justin Forsett. Some people are selling on Justin Forsett. Would you do something like that? Would you trade Sankey and one of your wide receiver 4s for Justin Forsett?
Yeah, no, I would definitely do that. I think this week is going to be interesting because Forsett is playing against the Raiders. So hopefully they should be up. He should be able to put in some production. I'm not a huge Forsett fan, quite honestly, but he's a guy that was going, in PPR drafts, but in the second round sometimes. So if you can package for something like that based on 1 week of performance against a really tough defense, why not?
Right. And Forsett, he does have a great matchup. I see him bouncing back. I don't know if it's going to be a big monster game. I don't know if they're going to, give him a million carries like we'd want, but another aging running back that had a very bad week, and he's being sold off extremely cheap right now in fantasy. Some people are kind of overreacting. Some people, like myself, I have him on, I think, 2 fantasy teams, 2 of my 9. And Frank Gore, I didn't get to see the whole game, but from what I was told, he didn't look so hot. He looked better in the first half. He was pulled out for a little bit due to something with an injury. He went back into the game. He finished the game, I think it was with 30-some yards, wasn't it? Yeah. He didn't have a very good game. I don't know if I'm obviously not selling Frank Gore because some people they're not going to give you anything for him right now, so you're going to sit there and hold him. He's got another tough matchup this week against the Jets, and that's the Monday night game. So that's going to be on national TV, people watching him. I mean, he might have a shot to score in it, to salvage his value, but right now I think we have to hold, right?
Yeah, I think we have to hold. I mean, it's possible you're going to find somebody who would be interested, and if you are, that's maybe you can package him if you can get him somewhere near his value. I think the issue with the Colts is you just don't know what their identity is going to be. They say they want to run the ball more. Now, Andrew Luck threw the ball 620 times last year, led the NFL in pass attempts. They didn't really do anything to solve their defensive issues. So they could be stuck in a situation where they're just throwing the ball a ton. And if they continue to do that, they're not a team that heavily involved the running backs in the passing game. I mean, a lot of people think about how Bradshaw had such a great year last year, but that's because he was getting all of these somewhat fluky touchdowns near the goal line in the passing game. So I think there are concerns with Gore. At the same time, I wouldn't sell him off for nothing. So he's probably a hold, potential sell if you can find someone out there who thinks they're buying low on him.
Right. And obviously he had that down game. Across the way, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Carlos Hyde. Now, I loved Carlos Hyde's talent. We know that us here at PFF, we had the metrics talking about Carlos Hyde and how good of a running back he is. I think the hesitance that we had on him in drafts was game script. We didn't think that the 49ers were going to be very good. Obviously, their defense looked better than we thought it would against Minnesota, but that might have something to do with Minnesota's very shaky offensive line right now and the fact that they've lost a few guys, over the past few weeks, some cogs in their machine. They're starting left tackle, they're starting center. It's a big problem right now. But Carlos Hyde looked extremely good with a makeshift offensive line. Now, granted, Reggie Bush got hurt early in the game, and they were trying to involve Bush, so he was going to be part of it. But once he went down, Carlos Hyde touched the ball on 50% of the 49ers plays. That's a ridiculous amount. Now, do you think that this was game script, Kevin, or do you think that this is exactly what to expect from Hyde going forward?
Hyde is one of these guys where it's so funny how things can change so quickly into a season, because he was someone I didn't like a whole lot this year for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I thought San Francisco was going to struggle this year. They had lost so many pieces on both sides of the ball, and if that happened, I saw him being kind of a 1 and 2 down, first and second down back, and then having Bush in there. And you're right, they were mixing in Bush quite a bit. And then when Bush went down with that calf injury, I mean, they just rode him. And it reminded me a whole lot of kind of Le'Veon Bell last year, quite honestly. They were giving him the ball over and over again at the end of the game just to wear things down, and he was looking good all across the board. They don't have a lot invested in Reggie Bush, so it would not surprise me if he actually turned into an uber workhorse this year. And he's a guy that I would buy. And this is a guy that I don't own anywhere. So I'm telling you, I'm not, talking my book on what I was doing this year, because I really think Bush going down and then him kind of proving the fact that he can run the ball is important. And I thought that defense looked pretty good. I mean, maybe you could say that it was all about the Vikings' struggles, but you had some guys flying around. You had some guys flying around in there, especially in the linebackers. Bowman was back. He looked good. If they can keep games close, then I think that they might just ride Hyde this year, and it could be a situation where he could turn into one of these kind of top 5 running backs. I mean, why not? Who else they have other than Bush to bring in? I mean, I like Mike Davis, but he's a guy that wasn't even active week 1, so that kind of shows you how they think about him. And they have that Australian rugby player, and I don't think he's ready for the prime time, quite honestly. I mean, it's a nice story, but I expect Mike Davis to jump above him. But there's not a clear kind of guy to take away the passing work right now, and that was the problem before with Reggie Bush. So now that that's gone, I'm all in on Carlos Hyde.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm going to ask you, who's a guy, let's say that you do not have Carlos Hyde on your team, and you're looking to trade for him. What are some packages that you might put together? What's a guy that you're willing to trade for him that you think that a lot of people might not? I know that's putting you on the spot, but could you put together something for somebody that might want Carlos Hyde and what they should put together to get him?
Yeah, sure. I mean, let me look at some other running backs right now. If you're playing in PPR leagues or something like that, if you could put together a pretty decent receiver and then maybe package someone like Danny Woodhead, I'm not saying you're actually going to get him. You're going to have to throw in a really good receiver for that, but I would try to do something like that. Demarco Murray, I would just be selling him like crazy right now. I mean, I know that it was a bad game script situation, but there's no reason to think that Darren Sproles isn't the most effective running back on that team. And then you have mixing in Mathews in there. It just seems like a nightmare from a perspective of who's going to end up scoring what. I mean, you got bailed out with a couple of touchdowns there for DeMarco Murray. So if you could sell, make someone think that you're kind of selling low on him, when actually I think it's a good deal that someone like DeMarco Murray I would sell. You got CJ Spiller coming back. I actually kind of like Spiller this year, but in one league I'm trying to package him with a wide receiver to see if someone will take Hyde into PPR league. So those are guys that I would look to sell. Probably DeMarco Murray being one of the biggest ones that I didn't buy him anywhere this year on concerns about how they would split up that backfield, and it didn't make me feel any better seeing what happened on Monday night.
Oh, that's interesting. And the fact that you said DeMarco Murray kind of puts my antennas up, because DeMarco Murray, he's somebody that I would wait another week to sell. Obviously, 12 carries, 20 yards is not going to get it done. But he did score the 2 touchdowns that, like you said, salvaged his fantasy day. Darren Sproles looks really good at 32 years old. I don't know when that guy's legs are going to stop. I actually like Darren Sproles a lot more than most going into this year, just because I felt like they were going to use him more of like a slot receiver than anything. And he paid dividends last week. He received 9 targets, which is just madness out of a running back. And I think Ryan Mathews, I watched that game, and I'm sitting there and I tell my buds, I tell my wife, I say, I hate Ryan Mathews. And you know why I hate Ryan Mathews? Because he went to Philadelphia when he knew DeMarco Murray had signed there. Ryan Mathews is talented. I hate seeing him. I mean, maybe this is the best role for him because he won't take the abuse. Maybe his body can't take it. He obviously knows himself better than I do, but every time I watch the guy run, he's so talented, and I just wish that I would have liked to have seen him on the Eagles team with Sproles, just them two. They didn't even need DeMarco. But it is what it is, and DeMarco Murray is playing his old team this week. That's why I'm holding him for one more week. I know it's the old team narrative, but I am all about it because I just don't think that the Cowboys have the run defense to stop Murray and with the additional, like, the motivation behind it. I mean, I don't play too much into that, but at the same time, you have to factor it in somewhat. I would sell DeMarco Murray after this week. I'm about that. So, yes, I agree with you there, but that's a hefty price to pay for Hyde, so that means you are all in on him, which is nice. So that pretty much touches on the running backs. The one more I did want to touch on that we didn't have in our script, but I want to talk about Adrian Peterson. What the heck is Norv Turner doing when Adrian Peterson gets 4 carries in the first half? What is Matt Asiata doing in the game when you have Adrian Peterson and Jerick McKinnon on the sideline? I don't understand it. Like, can you please bring me some insight as to why Norv Turner decided to just screw up the whole game plan?
Yeah, I really don't know. Although coming into this year, one of the upside narratives for Peterson was the fact that he would be involved in the passing game because traditionally Norv Turner has involved the running backs in the passing game. I thought he actually looked pretty good catching the ball, but he never has been someone who's caught the ball a lot. So maybe, I should forget what my eyes are telling me and kind of look at what the evidence has been in the past. Maybe they just Asiata is one of these guys who they bring in to catch the ball. So maybe it's a situation there. Maybe they were easing him back in. McKinnon was out there. I really like Jerick McKinnon, but he's just a guy that's not going to get a lot of work. And unfortunately, he gets kind of stuck in this committee with Asiata, even if Peterson goes down. So I think there are some concerning elements to it, but this is one where the game script was really bad. So I would kind of wait to see what's going to happen on Peterson. I wouldn't be selling on him, but it is mildly concerning, I would say.
It just frustrated me to watch that game and sit there and watch, the guy that you basically didn't trade away because you needed him to be a big part of your offense, and then you don't use him against San Francisco. Like, it just really didn't add up for me. If you could find someone in your league that's panicking on Peterson, I'm still buying. I just think that he didn't get the carries to get in enough of a rhythm. It's getting back into actual game speed for him. I know he's 30, but I'm still buying on Peterson. If you could find someone, if you're able to, me personally, if you're able to trade Carlos Hyde for Adrian Peterson, I'm doing it. And there's some people that are panicking out there saying that the Vikings look so bad they're willing to trade away Adrian Peterson. I would trade Hyde away for Peterson. Are you aboard that?
Yeah, I think that's probably a smart move. The thing is, I wasn't that high on Peterson coming into the season, but I would say, if you believed in Peterson coming into the season, I don't see any reason. I would say go get him for something like that. Sure. I just don't quite have that same personal opinion, but that's kind of more of just my personal opinion as opposed to what's a smart move for everyone out there.
Gotcha. And it seems like old guys are part of our show today. So we're moving into wide receivers, and I want to talk about one that it's gotten me panicked. It's got everybody panicked, but it's also led to an opportunity. Andre Johnson. Like I said, I didn't get to see a whole bunch of that Colts game. From what I heard, did you see, before I even get into it, did you get to see a lot of that game or no?
I saw bits of it. So I saw most of it, but I didn't see all of it, no.
All right. So I was told from a lot of people that Andre Johnson just looked done. They said that he looked old, he looked slow, he looked like it's almost like you get to the point where Reggie Wayne got in the Colts, and even though he was still there and playing, he was a body. But it's led to an opportunity. You and I had talked preseason. We talked about our sleepers. This makes me proud to say that we were both aboard the Donte Moncrief fan. Like, we were fans of him. We liked him before all this even happened. We knew that there would be an opportunity in this offense. When the guy gets a shot, he's been productive. I went back and I did some research on Donte Moncrief, and last year, of receivers that received 35 or more targets, he was 25th in terms of fantasy points per opportunity. So points per opportunity means, snaps, targets, things like that. So Moncrief was productive last year, and that's while, T.Y. Hilton was doing what he was doing. The tight ends were getting what they were doing. Now, some people are like, well, T.Y. got hurt, whatever. I went back and I looked at the snap count. Ty and Andre Johnson played pretty much 95% of the snaps. All right. Moncrief still saw 11 targets. Now he turned them into, I think it was 46 yards and a touchdown, which wasn't the greatest, but it was against Buffalo. So I am all aboard, even though his price is high right now because people are grabbing him off waiver wires. I was willing to spend 31% of my free agent acquisition budget on him in a league where it was shorter benches. I just couldn't afford to keep him there, even though I have him on a lot of my teams already. I was willing to spend, I think I'd put in a bid for $31 of my $100 budget to get him. I'm still buying Moncrief. I would trade someone like a Larry Fitzgerald for him, like an Anquan Bolden. I would trade those away to get Moncrief right now. Are you with me on this? Are you buying Donte Moncrief?
Yeah, I'm totally buying Moncrief. I mean, he was someone, like you said, that we had talked about him before. I thought he was a great option in case there was kind of two different cases for him. One was if someone went down, he would be elevated into the starting lineup. Great. And the second reason is that, Andre Johnson could fade away. And so we're kind of seeing the potential for both of those to happen, at least initially. And I think the concerning thing about Andre Johnson is they just threw it so many times. And it would be one thing if he wasn't productive, but he was targeted, but he wasn't even really targeted that much. Andrew Luck was just targeting T.Y. Hilton relentlessly most of the game. And then he was also targeting Moncrief. And Moncrief has everything you want other than maybe the high draft pedigree. I mean, he wasn't taken in the first couple of rounds, but he was very productive in college. He's big, he's fast. He's been productive whenever he's got an opportunity, and he has a quarterback who's going to throw the ball a ton. So I'm really all about him, and I think it's more than just a trade on what he can do when T.Y. Hilton is out. I think it's a possibility that he could supplant Andre Johnson sometime down the road.
And what's crazy about it, I don't know if this is the perception everywhere, but I was at work, my actual day job that I do full time, and I was talking with the guys there, and they were talking about Moncrief, and they were saying that we were talking about who Revis would shadow this week. And that's where I'm kind of torn. I don't know what they're going to do. If they're going to stick Revis on Andre Johnson, if they're not going to really have Revis shadow anybody and maybe just stick to a side. But they were like, well, Revis doesn't do the best with those small receivers. I'm like, well, Moncrief's not small. The perception among people, I don't know if it's just the public perception and then ours that are obviously in the industry, they thought Donte Moncrief was small. They thought he was 5'11" or 6 foot. And I told them, I'm like, no, the guy's 6'2". And they're like, he just doesn't look that big in the uniform. They didn't realize that he was actually that big. So I think the dark horse here is that Phillip Dorsett, if you get out in front of your league's waiver wire, if you have an extra bench slot, we loved Moncrief. He's somebody that I'm buying. Obviously, I'm willing to give up a lot for him. Phillip Dorsett is, if T.Y. Hilton's injury forces him to miss some time, or if it's a lingering thing, Phillip Dorsett and Donte Moncrief could be their 1-2 punch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. Although I think they'll continue to trot out Andre Johnson for a while now. I mean, I'm just more about Moncrief than about Dorsett at this point, just because he's a rookie. It's going to take him a little bit of time. Normally, you don't see rookies emerge until later on in the season, but anything's possible.
Right. I just think it's a good bench stash if you have a deep bench is all, because they do go 3 wide quite a bit. But yeah, that's more of a dark horse, in the background, just to keep an eye on in case anything does happen with TY, if it lingers, whatever the case may be. But going over to another high scoring offense, another old man, James Jones. He's another one that I sat there and I'm like, God, I can't get into this guy. I can't do it. And I understand people wanting to jump on him and say, him and Rodgers picked up right where they left off. Well, Aaron Rodgers, yes, they have that chemistry. But James Jones isn't going to be targeted more than, I don't see him getting more than 6 targets a game. Now, he only got targeted 4 times in week 1. He caught all 4 of them. Do you know how many yards after the catch he had? Just 1. He had 1 yard after the catch. So basically, 4 Aaron Rodgers passes that were caught with 1 yard after the catch turned into the number 4 receiver in week 1. James Jones, if he doesn't catch, those 2 touchdowns, we're looking at him in a completely different way. If those were Devontae Adams, everybody's talking about him about being a wide receiver 1. Obviously, Randall Cobb was playing at less than 100%. Devontae Adams was out there for every snap. I'm selling on James Jones because people believe that he's going to be a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end 3. I view him more as a wide receiver 4 that is touchdown dependent, that you can use in maybe a high-scoring affair. But meanwhile, Davante Adams, I am buying. I'm still buying him. You go out there and trade for him. They have Seattle this week, where Sherman is going into – he played in the slot a little bit this week, which is outside of the norm. We don't know if Seattle's defense is the same defense that they were without Cam Chancellor, with Dan Quinn leaving. There's a whole bunch of variables. What are you doing with the Packers wide receivers?
It was a tough week, I think, to figure out what's going on. Because you say he was only targeted 4 times. James Jones was only targeted 4 times. But then again, Aaron Rodgers only threw the ball 23 times. And it wasn't like they were dominating the entire game either. I mean, it was a fairly close game. But so they were feeding Lacy a lot. They just did not have a lot of attempts. They didn't play with a lot of pace. It was kind of what they did last year also. But last year they had, crazy efficiency across the board from the different receivers. So I think it's tough to pick out who you're going to go for. I thought James Jones looked decent, though. So he might be someone, if I had him, I'd look to hold him another week. And if he has another good performance, then I think at that point, maybe a good time to sell him. You just don't know how it's going to shake out in that receiver core. And we don't know yet if Davante Adams is actually going to be a go-to guy. I mean, they fed him with more targets. But again, he just had, kind of okay results. So he hasn't really shown anything yet. So I think there's a chance for James Jones to do something. I wouldn't sell him right now. I think I would hold him one more week. And if he had another great performance, you could really get a lot for him at that point.
Right. And fortunately, I was able to see up close. Like, I literally kept an eye on Davante Adams the entire time I was at the Bears game. I watched him. I watched his routes. And here's the thing. This is the thing that's missing with Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers right now. It's a little bit of timing issue. Like you saw, there was a third down play where, it was the typical Jordy thing where Rodgers throws it back shoulder on a comeback route, like where it's just he turns around and the ball's there. Where Davante, it seemed like he went too far into the route and Rodgers was like, no. And it's just like a timing issue with them too. I think when they get it, because Adams did receive 7 of the 23 or 24 targets, I think Rodgers threw. So we're talking about, almost 30% of the targets. Now, only 4 of them were catchable. He did catch all of them. He didn't have any drops or anything. I think it's a timing issue, and that's why I say that Davante Adams is a buy for me right now. I still view him as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy with huge upside. This week, Seattle, we don't know who's covering who. We don't know what the Packers are going to do because last year when the Packers played Seattle, if you remember, they had Jarrett Boykin go and play the right side of the formation the entire game. They knew Sherman would stick there. They literally played him there every snap. They put Jordy over on the left side or in the slot. Sherman's moving around. So it's something that's just we're going to watch for another week and see how it plays out. I'm interested to see the splits this week, just more to digest, a bigger sample size. But speaking of old men that might win you fantasy weeks, you could have won $2 million in DraftKings. Football is back, and it already feels like the playoffs thanks to Week 1 Fantasy at DraftKings.com. Millions being won each week. Every play in every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. All right? This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code PFF to play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. Enter PFF for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That is DraftKings.com. Kevin, did you hold on, I have to ask you, do you know how the guy that won $2 million, do you know how he won it?
Well, I saw a tweet about the fact that this nonsensical Carlos Hyde 5-yard run at the end of the game, which, first of all, I mean, number one, I was watching this and I was like, why don't they just take Hyde out of the game? Like, why are they running him over and over again? I mean, it's great from a fantasy perspective for Hyde owner. And then when they ran it on first down for 5 yards, and then they started taking a knee, I was like, they didn't even need to run it. They could have just been taking a knee on first down also. So I heard that that's what pushed some guy over the top. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, he won by, I think it was 0.17. So it was basically, if Hyde got 2 less yards, he wouldn't have won the $2 million. He won it when the 49ers could have taken a knee, and Carlos Hyde, I saw the run. It was like a 5-yard run, and it's what gave the guy a $2 million payday. That blows my mind. Like, I can't. What would you do if you're the guy that wins $2 million? What do you do? Like, do you go and do you take part of that money and fly out to San Francisco or to their practice facility and give Carlos Hyde a big hug? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know, man. You hold it tight. That's what I would say. I would just hold it really tight and try not to give it all back by the time the season's over. That's what I would do.
All right. So another guy that caught 4 targets in week 1 was Kendall Wright. Obviously, people are all over with him. They're just like, oh my God, him and Mariota. This is the connection. This is what you're aiming for. 101 yards and a touchdown. Are you buying, holding, or selling on Kendall Wright?
I kind of depends on the price, but I was buying him a lot in drafts, so I liked him. I thought he had a good chance at Mariota this year. I thought he'd be the clear #1 target. All of those things seemed to be playing out, although it was such a low-volume game, and they got up so much so early, we don't really know what happened. So I would be buying him. If you got a guy who thinks that they're selling high on him, then I would buy him or I would hold him. I don't think I would sell him just because I just don't think you're going to get anything that much for him right now. I don't know if people are buying in. Kendall Wright's one of those players who, at least especially in PPR, is productive, but I don't think anyone really gets excited about the opportunity to start Kendall Wright.
No, and that's what I said about the fact that it's the Titans offense. I just don't think they overnight went to a top 5 offense. Obviously, you're not going to sit here and say, well, this is the Kendall Wright of last year. It's not the Kendall Wright of last year, but it's also not the Kendall Wright of week 1. He's not going to have 100 yards and a touchdown every week. That's just not going to happen. Now, I could see him, at the end of the year, around 1,000 yards, maybe 6 touchdowns. I could see that. A decent wide receiver 3 in your lineup, better in PPR. He didn't see as many receptions as he normally would just because they were blowing him out. And I don't think his snap count was that high in the second half. But Kendall Wright is someone you're holding just because the perception before, like when you draft, like in drafts, was around a wide receiver 4 or 5. And now it might be wide receiver 3, which is more in line with what his actual value is. So I'm not selling him for what he's actually worth. I'm only selling him if you're going to get top dollar. And I just don't think people are going to pay that for Kendall Wright just yet. Someone that you're able to maybe buy low on, I'm buying. Okay, now I was not buying on him in drafts. Brandon Cooks. I wasn't buying him at his early 3rd round. Honestly, in some drafts, I started seeing him move into the 2nd round, like the late 2nd round. I just didn't. There was no way I was paying that price for Brandon Cooks. It wasn't going to happen. I like his talent. I like the situation that he's going to be peppered with targets. He saw 8 of them in week 1, turned him into just 4 catches for 49 yards. But Brandon Cooks is somebody that I am buying across the board. If you're able to find an owner that's just like, man, this guy isn't, that top 12 receiver that I thought he'd be, I'm buying him right now if I can get him discounted right now. Are you buying him as well?
Yeah, I would buy him. I mean, they threw the ball to the running backs a ton. I mean, they always throw the ball to the running back, so I'm not saying that will go away. But I highly doubt they're going to be throwing it to as much as they were that last game. They really didn't throw the ball downfield as much. Cooks was open a couple times, and they missed him. Patrick Peterson actually did a decent job shadowing Cooks. Peterson is one of those guys who I think probably gets a little bit too much credit, but he's better against the smaller receivers that he can use, that he could kind of jam at the line of scrimmage. So I think he was doing that effectively against Cooks. Once Cooks gets a little bit more room to run free, I think he'll open it up quite a bit more. And he's a guy that I would target as a buy low. Although I'll tell you, I've already tried to target him at a couple of leagues, and I haven't had much success. I wasn't selling the farm for him either, though. I was trying to see if I could buy low. So it might take another week before owners are willing to give it up. It's tough to give up a young guy that you drafted that high. So he's a definite hold if you got him, and I would try to buy him if you don't have him, if it's possible. You're probably going to have to sell somebody, though, that had a blow-up week 1 in order to get him. Here's
a question for you. If you own Brandon Cooks and someone offers you Mike Evans, would you do it?
I would not. But that's only because I think in that Tampa Bay offense, while I think they're going to throw the ball around a lot, when you have ASJ and you have Vincent Jackson and you have Evans, I just don't know if Evans is going to be able to provide you with any sort of kind of consistency with being targeted a lot there. Plus you have Doug Martin in the run game that they could use if they actually get up. Whereas in New Orleans, they don't have anybody. I mean, I don't know who they're throwing the ball to. They got really nothing at tight end. You got Brandon Coleman, who may come on as the other wide receiver. You got, Colston out there running around like he's walking on a bed of tacks the entire time, and you have the running backs that they're throwing it to. So I think Cooks has a better chance of kind of getting a blow up season if he gets heavily targeted.
Yep, I agree, and I am actually in on Cooks this week as a top 5 wide receiver play against Tampa Bay at home. Being at home, the Saints are going to come out swinging. I see them scoring maybe close to 30 points in this game, and I have Cooks projected. I was just looking at my projections. I have him projected for 7 catches, 90 yards, and about an 80% chance at a touchdown. I'm loving Brandon Cooks as a top 5 receiver this week. So if I'm able to buy him right now for somebody like a Mike Evans, I'm probably doing that. I don't know how cheap he's going out there. I haven't reached out to any owners. I've been so busy trying to get everything else done. But Brandon Cooks is someone I'm definitely buying on if you have an owner that's panicking a little bit. I think there was more tight end touchdowns in week 1 than there's ever been. Was that a correct stat that I saw?
Someone had mentioned it. I think it's been a very long time. It's something like 2010 or something like it. It's been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the week of the tight end in week 1. I know that Kevin's happy. He's got his guy Tyler Eifert. He went off. And honestly, here's my thing with Eifert. I like him. I do like him as a talent. I didn't think he played as big as he did on week 1. Like, he played big. Like, he looks like a wide receiver to me, but he, like, on his I think it was his second touchdown grab, he went up there, went over the guy and got it. Like, he looked really good to me on week 1. I know I'm assuming here, Kevin, that I know Eifert's your guy. You view him as like a top 5 receiver, so you're buying him, I take it?
Oh yeah. I'm trying to buy him where I don't have him, but I had him in a lot of places. The only thing that was bad is I actually had him as my second tight end in a lot of places where I had not a lot, in a few places where I had Gronk or Kelsey, so I didn't start him, and that would have been a nice 1-2 punch. I just really don't see the difference between Eifert and someone like Kelsey. I mean, I know Kelsey blew up, but he's actually getting less targets. He probably has a more conservative passing game generally with Alex Smith. Eifert was the clear. I mean, you could say he's a clear number 2 receiver, but week 1, he was the number 1 receiver. I mean, he was targeted. He had 35% of the targets. I don't see that going. I mean, I see that going down, of course. I think like he and AJ Green are probably going to be gobbling up, 50 to 60% of the targets every single week. And then the rest of the guys are going to get it spread out other places. So I think he's just locked in for top production this year. And you saw the talent. I mean, the guy had the measurables, but what you don't know necessarily coming to the NFL is how well these guys can catch in traffic, how good their hands are. And he just looked unbelievable as far as that's concerned. I mean, some of those touchdowns he was scoring and around the red zone too. I mean, he was just why not throw it? Why not throw it up to him? I don't know who's going to take the ball away from him when it comes to a safety or someone like that.
You know what's funny is I know when me and you discussed him preseason, you had talked him up to me, and I actually grabbed him in a few drafts. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go with Kevin in this one. I'll take him later. I just worried about the fact that there's Gio Bernard, there's Jeremy Hill, there's AJ Green. I just didn't feel like he had the ceiling that he showed us in week 1. I did have him. I have him on 2 teams. I had him benched in both. So just like you, unfortunately, I didn't get to reap the benefits of that. But man, he played big. So good call on him. The one that I'm a little down on right now is Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis. Man, I was hoping, especially in the game that kind of happened, they used who was it? Who's the backup tight end there that they used quite a bit in that game?
Oh God, I can't remember his name.
I can't remember his name either. But he received, I think, 4 targets. I think Vernon Davis had 5, which was just crazy to me. I didn't think that it would be split that much. He finished with something like 50 yards, I want to say, but he wasn't as. I don't know. He wasn't used as much as I thought he would be. What do you think of Vernon Davis in week 1?
I thought it was a little bit disappointing, but you have to remember that it wasn't as if he was playing well last year either. It's a combination of a low volume passing attack. The game script went against them. I mean, think about like Torrey Smith. I mean, Anquan Bolden. Nobody was getting the ball really. They just weren't passing the ball that much. And the few dropbacks that they had, you ended up having Kaepernick scrambling quite a bit out there. So. Yeah, I wouldn't panic too much. You didn't really invest a whole lot in him. But, obviously you'd much rather have someone like Jordan Reed, who was probably you're able to get at the end of drafts in that same sort of range right now. He's probably the guy that you like there. Or even Safarian Jenkins, who we talked about before, was another guy that you could have gotten pretty late. So I don't know what I would do with him. I would probably drop him for somebody else. If you could get someone off the waiver wire who's decent, maybe even like an Eric Ebron or someone like that. I mean, I don't love Ebron, but at least he's young. He got a touchdown. He got a few targets. He could work his way in. I just feel like he's probably a low ceiling for Vernon Davis this year.
All right, so it was Garrett Celek. That's the backup tight end. That's the reason we didn't know the name so well. Garrett Celek received 4 targets compared to 6 for Vernon Davis. I'm going to hold Vernon Davis for one more week. I'm going to see what he does against the Steelers. I believe this is a bad defense, the Steelers, and they could be passed on. And it's weird. When I was going through my projections this week, I don't even want to say where Colin Kaepernick ended up. I'm just going to say that I'm going to have him in a lot of tournaments. Colin Kaepernick against the Steelers and their awful defense. Their secondary is just, it's terrible. I mean, you see what Tom Brady did last week and what Gronk did to them. I'm holding on to Vernon Davis for one more week, and I want to see what they do. If he can't perform against the Steelers, I'm with you. I cut bait, and I say, yep, I was wrong on this one. I'm moving forward. But a guy that performed pretty well on week 1 was Austin Seferian-Jenkins. Now, he's someone, though, where I'm selling. I am selling all day on him. I'm not buying him turning into a top 5 tight end right now. I know he has the size. I'm not even saying that he doesn't have the talent. I think people are forgetting the fact that Mike Evans was out. The game script called for way too many passes and for a rookie, James Winston. He's not ready for that. And are you with me on this one? Are you selling Austin Seferian-Jenkins, or are you sitting here saying, well, actually, I'd keep him. I think he's a top 5 tight end.
Well, I definitely don't think he's a top 5 tight end. Keeping or selling, it's all price dependent. If you could package him and get something decent for him, then I'd think about selling him. The thing is, you're right. It was based a lot on the game script. I mean, he got a short touchdown earlier in the game, so that wasn't something that was purely based upon the fact that they were down so much. But then he racked up a decent amount of yards, and he had a very long touchdown in the fourth quarter. Or who knows if that's going to happen in a normal game. But the thing is, Tampa Bay could be horrible, and this could be happening a lot. They could be going down a lot. It sounds like they're willing to just let Winston go out there and let it rip, and if he throws a pick 6 every game, so be it. So in other words, look to target him on if you have a defensive team. That's what I would say, because I don't think they don't seem like they're going to take the air out of the ball and just play conservative. So he has the potential, I think, for blow up weeks. But as far as consistency is concerned, like we talked about Eifert a second ago, I mean, I think he's going to consistently be targeted. So you can count on him. ASJ, I'm not so sure about, but if you plug him into the lineup, he has obviously a higher ceiling than some other options in that same range.
Yeah, and if Mike Evans misses another week, I'm still on Seferian-Jenkins. I feel like he's going to produce. I just feel like he's third option in that team when VJax and Mike Evans are there. So, I mean, I don't know. He's that touchdown guy. I don't know. I think people are just underestimating the fact that Mike Evans was out. And Vincent Jackson saw 11 targets. He only caught 4 of them. Only 4 of them were catchable. I'm looking at all these numbers from Winston. I just feel like there's going to be a whole lot of inconsistency from everybody in that offense, not just Seferian-Jenkins. And like I said, it's not his talent that I'm worried about. It's more Winston. It's more of being third in line for targets. Whereas Eifert, like you mentioned, he's number 2. He's a clear number 2 on that team for targets. So that pretty much wraps up who we wanted to cover this week. Obviously, if you guys have any questions in regards to, buying, selling, holding, sit, start questions, hit me up on Twitter at Mike Tagliere NFL, or you could follow Kevin at Cole_Kev. We are active on Twitter. We'd like to talk with you guys to answer any questions that you might have. Now, don't forget, guys, you guys can follow us at PFF Radio on iTunes. You can listen on Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio, or watch the show on YouTube, as well as Fantasy Sports Network. Kevin, do you have any parting thoughts that you'd like to throw out there for week 2? Any bold predictions?
Well, this is not maybe a bold prediction for week 2, but I feel like going forward, we talked about this backfield a lot. My bold prediction would be that Darren Sproles in PPR will be the top running back for the Philadelphia Eagles this year.
That is pretty bold. Wow, that's a season-long one for you right there. And mine for this week would be that Larry Fitzgerald will finish as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver against the Chicago Bears. I think he's going to pull a James Jones, and he's going to catch a touchdown and maybe 70 to 80 yards. I believe that he finishes as a top 10 wide receiver this week. If you guys would like any more bold predictions or anything like that, hit us up, or make sure to check us out at PFF. Guys, don't forget that the subscription cost is only $29.99. You get, I'm not even kidding when I say I think it's over 25 articles a week that we produce, like just from us writers that we put our heart and soul into. I know that Kevin and I both do 2 articles a week, as well as a bunch of other talented writers there. Make sure to go check us out at PFF. Subscribe, $29.99. It's a small price to pay for the entire NFL season. But that's going to wrap it up for Kevin and I. And I guess we will see you guys after week 2, and we will break down the buy, sell, and hold of that week. But until then, guys, lights out.